The transport ship Mercy's hand dropped out of hyperspace above the burning world of Velora Prime. Commander Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck, her jaw tight as she watched the orange glow of fires spreading across the planet's surface. The Krath Dominion had been thorough in their destruction. Smoke rose from what had once been beautiful cities, and the oceans reflected the flames like mirrors of death. "Life signs?" she asked, her voice steady despite the horror before her. Lieutenant Marcus Webb checked his scanner, his fingers trembling slightly as he processed the data. "Scattered, Commander, very scattered, most concentrated near the southern continent, looks like. Children, ma'am, mostly children." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of what they were about to witness. The Velorans had been a peaceful species, small, delicate beings with soft blue fur and large golden eyes. They stood only about 3 feet tall when fully grown, with gentle voices and a culture built around art, music, and philosophy. They had refused to join any military alliance, believing that their neutrality would protect them from the conflicts that raged across the galaxy. They had been terribly, tragically wrong. "Prepare landing teams," Sarah ordered, her voice carrying across the bridge. "Full rescue protocol. Every ship we have goes down there. I want medical teams, food supplies, and blankets. Lots of blankets." The human fleet had arrived too late to save the Veloran adults. The Krath had targeted them specifically, killing every mature Veloran they could find while leaving the young ones alive. It was a message to the galaxy, a cruel and calculated statement. Resist the Dominion, and your children would be orphaned, left to die slowly without caretakers. The Krath believed this would discourage rebellion, would make other species submit rather than risk the same fate. But the Krath had not expected humans to respond. They had not factored humanity into their calculations at all. When the first landing craft touched down near a ruined city, Sergeant James Rodriguez was the first one out. He was a big man, broad-shouldered and scarred from a dozen battles. His armor was dented and marked with the symbols of his service, each scratch telling a story of combat survived. He looked like what he was, a warrior, a killer, someone who had seen the worst the galaxy had to offer. The small Veloran child hiding in the rubble saw him and screamed. It was a high, piercing sound, full of terror that no child of any species should ever know. James stopped immediately. He had been trained to respond to threats, to move fast and strike hard. But this was not a battlefield situation. This required something different. He held up his hands, showing they were empty. Then slowly, carefully, he knelt down in the ash and debris. He made himself small. He waited. The child was tiny, maybe the equivalent of a 4-year-old human. Its blue fur was matted with dust and dried blood that was not its own. Its golden eyes were wide with terror, pupils dilated, whole body trembling. It had been hiding for 3 days in a collapsed building, alone, hungry, thirsty, and afraid. It had heard the screams of its parents and then silence. It had heard the heavy footsteps of Krath soldiers and learned to stay very, very still. "Hey there, little one," James said softly. His voice, usually rough from years of shouting orders in battle, became something else entirely. Something gentle, something almost musical. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm here to help. I know you're scared. I know bad things happened. But the bad things are over now. You're safe." The child did not understand his words. Veloran spoke a different language, full of whistles and harmonics that humans struggled to replicate. But it understood his tone. It understood the way he had made himself small and unthreatening. It understood that this large, scary creature was trying to seem less frightening. It was confused. The last large creatures it had seen had killed its family. James reached into his pack slowly, making sure every movement was visible and predictable. He pulled out a ration bar and unwrapped it. He took a bite himself, showing it was safe, chewing and swallowing. Then he held it out toward the child. For a long moment, nothing happened. The child watched him with those enormous golden eyes, calculating, deciding. Fear and hunger warred within its small body. It had not eaten in days. Its stomach ached. But the fear was strong too, so strong. Hunger won. The little Veloran crept forward on all fours, moving through the rubble with the careful precision of a creature that had learned to avoid making noise. It snatched the food from James's hand and retreated to its hiding spot to eat. The sounds it made while eating were desperate, starving sounds that broke James's heart. He did not move. He just waited, patient as stone, while the child ate. When it finished, he held out another bar, and gradually, so gradually, the child crept closer. It sniffed at him, discovering his scent. It touched his hand with one tiny paw, feeling the warmth of his skin. James smiled. It was the first step. All across Velora Prime, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers, trained for war, found themselves coaxing terrified alien children out of hiding places. They shared their food, their water, their warmth. They learned quickly that the Veloran young needed physical contact to feel safe, their species being naturally social and tactile. So the soldiers held them despite their own discomfort with such intimacy. Private Elena Vasquez found a group of 12 Veloran children huddled in a basement beneath what had once been a school. They were the youngest survivors she had encountered, barely toddlers by human standards. When she entered, they cried and clung to each other in a tight ball of blue fur and golden eyes, whimpering. Elena had seen a lot of terrible things in her military career. She had fought in 3 planetary campaigns, survived hand-to-hand combat with Krath shock troops, and once spent 2 weeks behind enemy lines with nothing but a knife and her wits. She had thought herself hardened, immune to the softer emotions that civilians felt. She was wrong. Looking at those children, she felt something crack inside her, something hard and protective that she had built up over years of service. She felt tears threatening to fall, and she did not fight them. She did something that would have seemed impossible to anyone who knew her reputation. She sat down in the dust, pulled off her helmet so the children could see her face, and began to sing. It was a lullaby her grandmother had sung to her long ago on Earth, when she was small and the world seemed too big and too scary. The melody was simple and sweet, rising and falling like gentle waves. The Veloran children did not know the words. They did not speak her language, but they knew what a lullaby was. Their own parents had sung to them once before the darkness came. The melody was different, the voice was different, but the feeling was the same. Safety, comfort, love. Slowly, one by one, they crept toward this strange creature who was making such gentle sounds. One touch at her knee, another at her hand, a small body pressing against her side. By the time Elena finished the song, she had 12 small bodies pressed against her, seeking comfort, seeking warmth, seeking hope. "It's okay," she whispered, tears running down her face as she gathered them into her arms as best she could. "It's okay, I've got you. I've got all of you." Commander Chen coordinated the rescue from orbit, managing the deployment of ships and resources, but she came down to the surface on the 3rd day. What she saw changed her forever. The human soldiers had transformed. These men and women, trained killers all, had become caretakers. They carried Veloran children on their shoulders in their arms, strapped to their chests in makeshift slings fashioned from blankets and equipment straps. They had learned which foods the children could eat by careful trial and error. They had learned how to calm them when they had nightmares by holding them close and humming softly. They had learned how to make them laugh by making silly faces and playing simple games. One Marine, a woman named Tors who had single-handedly held a defensive position against 50 Krath soldiers just 6 months ago, was currently teaching a group of Veloran children how to play patty cake. Her fierce expression was gone, replaced by genuine joy as the children giggled at the game. Their small blue paws slapped against her palms, and she cheered every time they got the rhythm right. "Commander," Sarah's aide said, approaching her with a tablet, "we've completed the count. There are over 2,000 Veloran children on this planet. No adults survived, not one." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing the enormity of what that meant. An entire generation orphaned, a species that might not recover, children who would grow up without parents, without elders to teach them their culture and history. and the Galactic Council's response to our request for assistance. The aide looked uncomfortable, his jaw tightening. They say it's not their problem, ma'am. The Velorans were not member species. They never paid dues or contributed to collective defense. The Council says there are no resources available for refugees from non-member worlds. I see. Sarah's voice was cold enough to freeze hydrogen. And the Krath. They've claimed Veloran space as their own by right of conquest. They say any attempt to remove property from their territory will be considered an act of war. Property? They were calling these children property. Sarah looked out at her soldiers, at the human warriors who had become parents and protectors overnight. She watched a sergeant blow a raspberry on a Veloran child's belly, making it squeal with laughter. She watched a medic carefully bandage a tiny cut on a tiny paw with more attention than she would give a fellow soldier's wound. She thought about what the galaxy expected humans to do: walk away, leave the children to their fate, avoid conflict with the powerful Krath Dominion, be practical, be sensible, be like everyone else. The galaxy did not understand humans very well. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Sarah said, "and start loading the children onto our ships. We're taking them home." "Commander, the Krath will see that as a declaration of war. Our forces are not prepared for a full-scale conflict." "Then they can come and try to take these children from us." Sarah's eyes were hard as diamond. "I'd like to see them try." The evacuation took 2 more days of careful, patient work. Every human ship was filled with Veloran children, their cargo bays transformed into temporary nurseries. The soldiers had become experts at caring for them, learning their needs, their fears, their little personalities. Each child was assigned a human protector, someone who would be responsible for their well-being during the journey and beyond. James Rodriguez ended up with 7 young ones attached to him like satellites orbiting a planet. They followed him everywhere, holding onto his legs, his hands, his armor straps. They ate when he ate and slept when he slept. The biggest, a boy he had named Sam after his little brother back on Earth, refused to let James out of his sight even for a moment. "Looks like you've got yourself a family, Sergeant," Elena teased him as they boarded the transport. James looked down at the 7 pairs of golden eyes looking up at him with complete trust. Something shifted in his heart, something permanent, a door opening that would never close again. "Yeah," he said softly, a smile spreading across his scarred face. "I guess I do." The fleet departed Velora Prime just as the first Krath warships appeared on long-range sensors. They were coming to reclaim their property, to punish the humans for their interference. They would find nothing but ashes and empty buildings, and the message that humanity had left behind. And they would learn what happened when someone threatened children that humans had claimed as their own, because that's what the Velorans were now. They were theirs, and humans protected their own. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks through the winding paths of hyperspace. In that time, something remarkable happened. The human fleet had become a floating orphanage. Every ship, from the massive carrier Defiance to the smallest patrol craft, was filled with the sounds of children. Veloran young running through corridors on their little legs, playing in cargo bays with improvised toys, sleeping in bunks next to their human protectors. The gray metal walls of warships were decorated with children's drawings made from whatever materials could be found. The soldiers adapted with surprising speed. These were people trained to fight and kill, but they found that many of their skills translated well to childcare. Discipline became routine, creating structure that helped frightened children feel safe. Tactical awareness became making sure no child wandered into dangerous areas like engine rooms or airlocks. Combat medicine became treating scraped knees and upset stomachs with the same careful attention. Dr. Rebecca Okonkwo, the chief medical officer aboard Mercy's Hand, worked around the clock to understand Veloran biology. She studied the children with their cooperation, learning their baseline vital signs, their nutritional needs, their common ailments. She discovered that they needed specific nutrients that human food did not provide, so she synthesized supplements using the ship's medical fabricators. She learned that they could not regulate their body temperature as efficiently as humans, so she issued thermal blankets to every human caretaker. She found that they were susceptible to certain human bacteria, so she implemented quarantine protocols and developed vaccines. "They're remarkably adaptable," she told Commander Chen during a briefing, her tablet filled with charts and data. "Their immune systems are actually responding well to controlled exposure to human microbiomes, and their emotional development. Commander, these children are bonding with their human caretakers at an incredible rate." "Is that healthy for them? Long-term, I mean." "I believe so, yes. Velorans are highly social creatures by nature. The young ones need attachment figures to develop properly, both emotionally and neurologically. Without adult Velorans to bond with, they're imprinting on the humans who are caring for them." Dr. Okonkwo paused, considering her next words carefully. "Commander, these children are beginning to see their human protectors as parents, actual parents, not just temporary guardians." Sarah considered this revelation, its implications rippling outward in her mind. And how do the soldiers feel about that responsibility? The doctor smiled, a warm expression that lit up her tired face. "I think you should see for yourself." Sarah toured the ship that evening, walking through corridors that had been designed for war but were now serving a gentler purpose. What she saw confirmed the doctor's words. In one section converted into a sleeping area, she found Corporal David Kim reading a story to a group of Veloran children. He had learned that their species had a rich oral tradition, with stories passed down through generations, so he had started telling them human fairy tales, adapting them as he went to remove frightening elements. The children were captivated, their golden eyes wide as he described brave knights rescuing those in need and terrible dragons being defeated by cleverness rather than violence. In the mess hall, Private First Class Maria Santos was teaching a young Veloran how to eat with utensils. The child was struggling, getting more food on its fur than in its mouth, but Maria's patience was infinite. She demonstrated again and again, celebrated every small success, and laughed warmly when the child finally succeeded in getting a whole spoonful where it was supposed to go. In the medical bay, Alina Vasquez sat with a sick child who had developed a fever from exposure to a new environment. She sang softly while Dr. Okonkwo administered treatment, holding the child's paw throughout the procedure. The child was scared, but it clung to Alina's hand and trusted that everything would be okay because its human was there. And in the cargo bay that had been converted into a sleeping area with mattresses and blankets covering the metal floor, Sarah found James Rodriguez. He was lying on a mat with his 7 charges arranged around him in a protective circle. The smallest, a girl he called Lily after the flower, was sleeping on his chest, rising and falling with his breath. Even in sleep, James's hand rested protectively on her back, a gesture of care that came as naturally as breathing. Sarah stood there for a long time watching. These were her warriors. They had killed enemies without mercy, held positions against impossible odds, and never showed fear in the face of death. Now they were fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, protectors and nurturers. The transformation was complete and she knew, permanent. These soldiers would never be quite the same again. She had never been prouder to serve with them. The first craft transmission came a week into the journey, breaking into their communications like a storm cloud on a clear day. "Human vessels, you are carrying stolen property of the Craft Dominion. You will surrender this property immediately or face the consequences. This is your only warning." Sarah responded personally, standing on her bridge with her back straight and her voice steady. "These are children. They are not property. They are under human protection and they will remain so. Return to your space." "This is an act of war, Commander. Your government has not authorized this action. You are alone." "Then it is an act of war." Sarah's voice did not waver, did not shake, did not show the slightest hesitation. Attack us if you dare, but know this, every human in this fleet will die before we surrender a single child to you. And humanity has a long memory. If you want a war, you will have one. A war that will not end until the Krath Dominion is nothing but a footnote in history books. The transmission ended. The Krath did not respond for several hours. Sarah waited on the bridge, watching the tactical display, ready for anything. But the Krath were following at a distance. Long-range sensors showed a fleet of 50 Krath warships shadowing the human convoy, just beyond weapons range. They were waiting for something. Perhaps reinforcements from their homeworld. Perhaps orders from their commanders. Perhaps they were simply unsure how to proceed against an enemy who did not seem to care about the odds. Humans were an unknown quantity in the galaxy. They had only been a spacefaring species for 2 centuries, newcomers compared to empires that had ruled for millennia. They had fought minor conflicts, but nothing on the scale of a full war. The other powers viewed them as young and foolish, aggressive, but ultimately not a major threat. The Krath had expected their warning to be enough. The Krath were about to learn how wrong that assessment was. Word of the rescue had spread through human space like wildfire through dry grass. The images of soldiers caring for alien children had captured the public imagination in a way nothing else had. News networks ran constant coverage. Social media exploded with discussions and debates, and an overwhelming tide of support. Donations poured into funds set up to support the refugees. Families volunteered by the thousands to adopt Veloran orphans. Politicians, sensing the public mood, threw their support behind Commander Chen's decision with unusual speed and unity. And the military began to mobilize. Earth Command sent a message to the convoy, encrypted on the highest protocols. Reinforcements en route. Fleet mobilization at unprecedented scale. Protect the children at all costs. Humanity stands with you. The first battle group arrived 4 days from human space, dropping out of hyperspace like a wall between the convoy and the pursuing Krath fleet. 12 battleships, 30 cruisers, and over 100 support vessels, their hulls gleaming with fresh maintenance and their weapons primed for combat. Admiral Michael Torres, Elena's father, commanded the battle group from his flagship. His voice came over the fleet-wide channel, calm and professional but with an edge of steel beneath. Krath Dominion Fleet, you are approaching human-protected space. The children you are pursuing are now citizens of the Human Federation by unanimous vote of our Parliament. Any hostile action against them or their protectors will be met with overwhelming force. You have one chance to withdraw. Take it. The Krath fleet hesitated, their formation wavering as commanders communicated with each other. 50 ships against over 140, with more human reinforcements arriving by the hour. The mathematics of the situation had changed dramatically. This was no longer a simple pursuit of fleeing prey. After a tense hour during which both fleets held their positions, weapons locked and ready, the Krath turned and retreated into the darkness of space. The children were safe, for now. Arrival at Earth Station Alpha was unlike anything the human race had experienced in living memory. The massive orbital platform, usually a hub of commerce and military activity with its business-like atmosphere and efficient operations, had been transformed overnight. Banners hung from every surface in a rainbow of colors, welcoming the Veloran refugees. Volunteers lined the docking bays in their thousands, ready to help with the transition. Musicians played gentle melodies. Children from Earth schools held signs with messages of welcome written, in both human languages and attempts at Veloran script. And then there were the families. Over 300 human families had applied to adopt Veloran children in the weeks since news of the rescue broke. They had been screened by social workers, trained in Veloran cultural basics, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Now they waited in a designated area, nervous and excited, to meet the young ones who would become their sons and daughters. The disembarkation was slow and careful, designed to minimize stress on the children. Each child left the ship holding the hand of their human protector, their golden eyes wide as they took in the strange new environment with its different smells and sounds, and the overwhelming presence of so many new faces. Many of them clung tighter to their soldiers, afraid of the changes, not wanting to let go of the only security they knew. James Rodriguez walked down the ramp with his 7 charges clustered around him like ducklings following their mother. Sam held his right hand with a grip that would not be broken. Lily was cradled in his left arm, her small paws clutching his uniform. The others pressed close, seeking the comfort of his presence, the familiar scent of him. A woman rushed forward from the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered face. James's mother, Maria Rodriguez, who had traveled from Earth the moment she heard about what her son had done. "Oh, my boy," she said, her voice breaking as she looked at the children. Then her expression softened into something like wonder. "You've brought me grandchildren." She knelt down, getting on their level the way James had taught her in their communications, and opened her arms. The Veloran children looked at James, uncertain, seeking his guidance. He smiled and nodded, giving them permission. "This is my mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's going to help take care of you. She's part of our family now. She's safe." Slowly, tentatively, the children approached the older woman. She gathered them into her embrace, all of them, holding them as if she had always known them, as if they had always been hers, as if this moment had been waiting to happen since the beginning of time. Similar scenes played out across the station throughout that long day and into the night. Human families meeting their new Veloran children, beginning the process of becoming true families. The children were scared and confused by all the newness, but they had their human protectors nearby, and that was enough to give them courage. Not all the children would go to new families. Many of the soldiers had decided to become permanent guardians themselves, unable to give up the bonds they had formed during the journey. Elena Vasquez had applied to adopt the 12 children she had found in the basement on Velora Prime, the ones she had sung to sleep every night since. Her application had been approved in record time. "I sang to them," she told the review board when they asked why she wanted to take on such an enormous responsibility. "I sat down in the dust of their ruined world and I sang them a lullaby. I promised them they would be safe. I can't break that promise now. They're mine." The board had not even deliberated. They simply stamped her approval and wished her luck with genuine warmth. Dr. Okonkwo established a medical center specifically for Veloran children within weeks of their arrival. She trained human doctors and nurses in their care, wrote protocols that would become the standard for interspecies medicine, developed pharmaceuticals tailored to their biology. Within months, she had become the leading expert on Veloran physiology, publishing papers that would be studied in medical schools for generations to come. But the work of rescue and medicine was only the beginning. The Veloran children were safe now, yes, but safety was just the foundation. They needed to become part of human society, to find their place in a world that was strange and different from the one they had lost. They needed to learn and grow and heal from the trauma of what they had witnessed. The human race rose to the challenge with an enthusiasm that surprised even the most optimistic observers. Schools created special programs for Veloran students, with smaller desks and adjusted curricula. Teachers attended workshops on Veloran learning styles, which favored collaboration over competition and visual learning over text-based instruction. Human children were taught about their new classmates through age-appropriate lessons about different species and the importance of kindness to those who were different. The integration was not always smooth. There were problems, conflicts, misunderstandings. Some humans resisted the changes, seeing the Velorans as aliens who did not belong, as strangers who were taking resources that should go to human children. They whispered in dark corners that humans should focus on human problems first, that charity should begin at home. These voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of support. Because humans had seen the images that would define a generation, They had seen warriors holding children. They had seen the fierce, protective love in the eyes of soldiers who had adopted orphans from a burning world. They had seen their species at its best, and they wanted desperately to be part of that story. The first Veloran children entered human schools 6 months after the rescue, walking through doors that had been widened to accommodate their different proportions. They were nervous, clutching the hands of their human parents, their golden eyes darting around at the strange environment filled with unfamiliar sounds and smells. But they were not alone. Every Veloran child had a human buddy, assigned by the school to help them adjust to their new world. These buddies took their jobs with the seriousness that children bring to important tasks, guiding the newcomers through the confusing landscape of human education, explaining customs and games, translating when needed, defending them from the occasional bully with words, and when necessary, with fists. Friendships formed across species lines, natural and unforced. Children who played together at recess, who studied together for tests, who slept over at each other's houses and learned each other's favorite foods. They did not see alien and human when they looked at each other. They saw friend. They saw family. The Veloran children began to thrive in ways that surpassed every expectation. Sam Rodriguez, James's oldest charge, became the first Veloran to win a human science fair 3 years after the rescue. His project on interspecies communication patterns, combining Veloran harmonics with human linguistics, earned him praise from university professors and a full scholarship to any institution he wanted to attend. He chose the military academy, wanting to follow in the footsteps of the father who had saved him from the ashes. Lily Rodriguez, the smallest girl who had slept on James's chest during the long journey from Velora Prime, discovered she had a gift for music that transcended species boundaries. Her voice, high and sweet with the distinctive Veloran harmonics that humans found hauntingly beautiful, brought audiences to tears wherever she performed. She sang lullabies, the ones Alina had taught her back on that first terrifying night, and new songs she wrote herself about finding family in unexpected places. And Alina's 12 children, the ones she had found huddled together in a basement beneath a ruined school, scattered across human space as they grew into adulthood. Some became doctors, following in the footsteps of Dr. Okonkwo, who had healed their childhood ailments. Some became teachers, wanting to help other refugee children adjust to new worlds. Some became soldiers, determined to protect others the way they had been protected. All of them remembered. All of them carried the memory of the day a strange creature in armor had sat down in the dust of their destroyed world and sung them a lullaby. That was how they knew humans were safe. That was how they knew, with the unshakable certainty of childhood knowledge, that humans were family. 10 years after the rescue of Velora Prime, the galaxy looked very different. The Human Federation had grown from a minor power to a major force in galactic politics. Their reputation had spread to every corner of known space, not just as warriors who could fight, but as protectors who would fight for others. Species across the galaxy had heard the story of the Veloran orphans, of how humans had risked war with a major power to save children who were not even their own kind. When the Krath Dominion attacked the Cellin homeworld, launching a similar campaign of genocide against another peaceful species, it was the humans who responded first. A fleet twice the size of the one that had rescued the Velorans dropped out of hyperspace above Cellin, driving back the attackers with overwhelming force. This time, humanity arrived before the genocide could be completed. Millions of Cellin were saved, evacuated to human space where families were already lining up to adopt the orphaned children. When the refugee crisis on Nexar Prime threatened to destabilize an entire sector of space, it was humans who organized the relief effort with their characteristic efficiency and compassion. Human ships carried food and medicine to the displaced populations. Human soldiers maintained order without violence. Human families opened their homes to those who had lost everything, just as they had done for the Velorans. When the slave markets of the Trader Confederation came under attack by an unknown force, the attackers were revealed to be human. Liberation fleets, crewed entirely by volunteers who had taken leave from their regular duties, swept through the Confederation's territory with surgical precision, freeing millions of beings who had been considered property. Among the fleet commanders was Captain Sam Rodriguez, leading his own ship into battle against the same evil that had orphaned him a decade before. Humans had become the protectors of the galaxy, not through conquest or domination, but through compassion that inspired others to hope. The Galactic Council, which had once refused to help the Veloran refugees, now found itself increasingly irrelevant. Species bypassed the Council entirely, forming direct alliances with humanity. They trusted humans to help them, to protect them, to treat them fairly. The Council's bureaucratic delays and political compromises seemed petty compared to humanity's willingness to act. Not everyone was happy about this shift in galactic power. The Krath Dominion had nursed their grievance for a decade, watching their influence wane while humanity's grew. They had been humiliated by the humans, forced to retreat from a mere convoy of refugee ships by the threat of war. Their empire had stagnated while other species flocked to human protection. They wanted revenge, wanted to prove that they were still the dominant power in their region of space. The first attack came without warning on a quiet day in human space. The human colony of New Haven, home to 50,000 people on a green and pleasant world, was struck by a Krath battle fleet that dropped out of hyperspace with weapons already firing. They targeted the civilian population deliberately, making no distinction between military and non-combatant, killing without mercy. By the time human warships arrived from the nearest starbase, the colony was in ruins, its cities burning just as Velora Prime had burned a decade before. But this time, the Krath had made a terrible miscalculation. Among the dead on New Haven were 300 Veloran citizens, descendants of the original refugees and new immigrants who had come seeking the protection of human space. They had built homes and businesses and families on that colony world. They had considered themselves human in all but biology. The attack had killed human and Veloran alike, making no distinction between species. The response from both species was immediate, overwhelming, and unified. Every Veloran in human space volunteered for military service within hours of the news breaking. They wanted to fight the creatures who had destroyed their original homeworld and now attacked their adopted one. Human recruitment centers were overwhelmed with applications from both species, lines stretching around blocks as people waited to sign up. Among the volunteers was a young woman with blue fur and golden eyes. Her name was Lily Rodriguez, and she had put aside her promising singing career to join the fleet. Her father, James, now retired from active service with the rank of colonel, tried to talk her out of it. "You don't have to do this," he said, his face lined with worry, aged by years of responsibility. "You're an artist, not a soldier. The galaxy needs your voice." "I'm your daughter," Lily replied, her voice carrying the harmonic overtones that made Veloran speech so distinctive. "You taught me what it means to protect family. The humans of New Haven were my family. The Velorans who died there were my family. Everyone who lives in fear of the Krath is my family. They have to learn that they cannot hurt our family without consequences." James looked at her for a long moment, seeing the child he had pulled from the ruins of Velora Prime, the girl who had slept on his chest during the long journey to safety. She was grown now, an adult by both human and Veloran standards, with her own will and her own choices to make. He pulled her into a hug, the same way he had held her when she was tiny and terrified, and needed to know that someone would protect her. "I'm proud of you," he whispered into her soft fur, "so proud." The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in living memory. Human and Veloran forces fought side by side, a partnership forged in the fires of shared tragedy and tempered by years of love. The Velorans brought their unique abilities to the fight, keen senses that could detect ambushes before they were sprung, natural agility that made them deadly in close combat, and an intimate understanding of craft tactics from having been their victims. The humans brought their firepower, their strategic genius, their unbreakable will to protect those they loved. Admiral Sarah Chen, her hair now gray but her eyes as sharp as ever, led the combined fleet. She stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the forces under her command, at the ships crewed by humans and Velorans working together in perfect harmony. "Today," she said over the fleet-wide channel, her voice carrying to every ship, "we end this threat. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten our children. Today, the Craft Dominion learns why you never, ever hurt someone a human loves." The battle for Craft Prime lasted 3 days and 3 nights by human counting. Human determination met Craft ferocity in the darkness between stars. Veloran precision combined with human firepower in devastating effect. Ships were lost on both sides. Lives ended in the vacuum of space, but the human-Veloran alliance pushed forward with unstoppable momentum. Captain Sam Rodriguez led his ship, the Velora's Memory, in a daring assault on the Craft command station. His crew was mixed, human and Veloran, and they fought with a coordination that came from years of growing up together, training together, becoming family together. When the command station fell in a flash of fire, the Craft fleet broke. They fled in all directions, their coordination shattered, their will to fight gone. The dominion that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was crumbling. The war ended not with a dramatic final battle, but with a surrender broadcast across all frequencies. The Craft Dominion, seeing the complete collapse of their military power, sent envoys to negotiate terms. They had expected to face a vengeful humanity, demanding blood for blood, seeking to do to the Craft what the Craft had done to so many others. They found something unexpected. Admiral Chen met with the Craft delegation personally, sitting across from them in a bare room on a neutral station. She looked at them with eyes that remembered burning worlds and orphaned children. "We could have destroyed you completely," she said, her voice flat and cold. "We had the power to wipe your species from the galaxy, to finish the job the way you finished so many others." The Craft delegation was silent, waiting for the killing blow. "Then why didn't you?" "Because that's not who we are." Chen leaned forward and something shifted in her expression. Not mercy exactly, but something more complicated. "We protect. We don't destroy. We fight to save, not to conquer. The war is over. Your military power is broken. But if you ever threaten children again, any children of any species, anywhere in this galaxy, we will return. And we will not be merciful a second time." The Craft Dominion accepted the terms. They withdrew from their conquered territories. They freed every slave in their empire. They paid reparations to the survivors of their countless victims. And they learned a truth that would reshape the galaxy for generations to come. Humans were not to be trifled with, not because of their weapons or their ships or their numbers, though all of those were formidable, but because of their hearts, because they would fight for anyone they considered family, would sacrifice everything to protect the vulnerable. And they had a remarkable, almost inexplicable capacity to consider almost anyone family, given half a chance. The war changed everything about the galaxy. Species that had once viewed each other with suspicion and fear began to cooperate, inspired by the example set before them. The partnership between humans and Velorans, former strangers who had become one people, showed what was possible when different beings chose love over fear. The Galactic Council reformed itself completely, with humanity and their Veloran partners as founding members of a new order. New policies were enacted, protections for refugees that had real teeth, prohibitions on slavery that were actually enforced, mutual defense treaties that meant something because humanity would back them up. And at the heart of it all were the original Veloran refugees, now adults with children and grandchildren of their own, living proof of what compassion could accomplish. Elena Vasquez, long retired from military service, spent her golden years in a house full of love on a peaceful human world. She was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, both human and Veloran, and the new mixed families that had become common. Her singing voice had grown rough with age, but she still hummed lullabies to the little ones who came to visit, teaching them the same melody she had sung in a ruined basement so many years ago. Dr. Okonkwo received the highest honors the galaxy could bestow for her contributions to interspecies medicine. Her research had saved millions of lives, had established the foundation for medical cooperation between dozens of species. Her legacy would continue for centuries after her passing. James Rodriguez passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 93, surrounded by his family on every side. His funeral was attended by thousands, humans and Velorans and members of a dozen other species, all of them connected somehow to the man who had knelt in the ashes of a burning world and offered a ration bar to a frightened child. Lily sang at his funeral. She sang the lullaby that Alina had taught her, that Alina's grandmother had taught her, a melody that had passed across generations and species and the vast distances between stars. Her voice rose in the ancient song, sweet and sad and full of love. When she finished, there was silence throughout the memorial hall. Then, softly, the gathered crowd began to hum along, recognizing the melody that had become an anthem of hope. Humans and Velorans together, their voices blending into something new, something that spoke to the best of what both species could be. That was the legacy of Velora Prime. That was the gift the human warriors gave to the galaxy when they adopted a species of orphaned children and raised them as their own. Not just survival, but family. Not just protection, but love. Not just two species existing side by side, but one people, bound together by the choice to care for each other across the vastness of space. The stars had seen many empires rise and fall across billions of years. They had witnessed wars and conquests, extinctions and genocides, the same patterns repeating throughout history. But this was something different. This was new under any sun. This was hope. And it had all started with a soldier in armor, kneeling in the ruins of a destroyed city, holding out his hand to a frightened child. That was humanity. That was what they brought to the galaxy when they reached for the stars. Not just weapons, not just technology, not just ambition and drive. Love, simple, fierce, unbreakable love. And the galaxy would never be the same again.